We're going to hear from Ben Nicholson. He is going to be presenting Creating Content for Music. Let's welcome in Ben. Hey there.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, Ben.
Good to see you, Ben.
Good to see you both as well.
You're in a void.
I know, I'm in the void. I was like doing some keying things with my OBS thing and it wasn't working right, so I just gave up. I'm in a void in Ohio. How's that sound? COVID void in Ohio.
There's so much coming out of Ohio these days.
Oh,
it's really rocking.
Yeah, it is. It's rocking.
Well, we're really happy to have you here. We'll leave you and your void with the room to present. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. All right, so I'm hoping that my screen is sharing, but I want to today kind of make this transition for you all. A lot of creators and a lot of educators may be on today, a lot of content creators, producers, a whole gamut of things. And so one of the best uses I think of my time with you all today is sort of take you through some of the best practices that I've put together over the years. I've been doing content in one way, shape, or form for about 18 years. Worked with a lot of the people involved in the community here with Framework, and been through a lot of creative processes, a lot of production processes, a lot of technical processes. So I introduce myself primarily as an educator right now because that's where I'm spending most of my time. I teach at Miami University up the road in Oxford, Ohio, and I teach in their emerging technologies and business and design department, which is kind of like a crossover between social media and games. So they teach game design, game management, 3D, things like that. And I come alongside and apply those game technology things like Unreal, Unity, Touch Design or Notch now to create and show students how to make visuals in a different environment, whether it's XR or screen content or projection mapping, things like that. So what I've done is taken my life learnings and also the things that I pulled from some amazing people out there who have taught me how to do the things that I do from a producer and technical area, and I've applied them to try to train and inform the next generation of students in various ways. So I've worked on a lot of things. One of the biggest jobs I've ever done is pictured here, which is the Katy Perry Super Bowl, which is where it kind of represents a collision of a lot of forces, which was disguise, which was projection mapping, which was great creatives like Baz Halpin and guys like Ash were on that way at the beginning of where media servers and projection mapping, all those things were colliding. So it's an interesting talking point. I've also been involved with U2 on several tours, Innocence and Experience tour with Willie Williams and Treatment and those guys, and then also on the Joshua Tree 30th anniversary tour. I'm not going to play things from that. You can Google those on your own and check them out and see kind of what they're all about. But really what I'm interested in is this bridge, and this is me in a chapel built in 1912 at Miami University in COVID. We were doing some projection mapping stuff. And so what I do is I teach two classes, which one is creating visuals from music, which is a creative direction process class, really talking about pitching and getting feedback and then pitching again and pitching back and getting feedback and then going into creation. And the side, going alongside with that is a class called Motion Design Toolkit, where I spend about 3 weeks in After Effects Cinema, 3 weeks in Notch, and then 3 weeks in Touch Designer. So those two things moving together kind of represent what I'm going through here, which is teaching the technology, but then how to relate to clients, how to manage projects, how to create order in a chaotic system. Here's some fun things that the class did there. That's Brad on Touch Designer, and this is the projection mapping project at the end of the semester in the chapel. But I've found for those educators out there that are looking for ways to get students involved in this kind of work, meaning visuals for music or projection mapping, that Touch Designer and Notch and these real-time tools are really edifying. So some of the stuff that Jeremy was talking about, some of the stuff that Smash is going to be talking about later in the day, are really in this nexus of creating visuals in a way that they can play back and see something pretty quickly on a decent gaming computer as well. So I'll move through this. So to understand me is to understand my point of view on experience design. So experience design to me is the purposeful crafting of a space, potentially accessing the entirety of the human senses to perform for the purpose to inform, connect, entertain, lead, or simply be together with one another in the moment. So experience design is to know your audience and know that you're not necessarily just presenting to a client or a design company or an agency, but there are people in the room that you have to understand and that you're making something to move them and to get them to feel something, right? So I'll be crashing through content creative process. This is some principles, examples of some drills and some formats that I've got, but the goal is to get to the bottom of the common language in the process. And I think Laura and Elliot would agree that there's a shorthand that happens in the community of content and stage content, concerts, and things like that that people would just kind of fall into, but new people pick it up by observation, and it's not really necessarily taught, or I didn't get taught it taught to me, right? I was an editor and did some graphics in college, but I had to pick it up as I went along. So I'm quantifying and distilling a lot, so I'm going to move pretty quickly. So forgive, the supersonic speed at 30,000 feet, but I'm hoping that it starts to get you thinking about how you present your own things, and also like what you've learned over the years, perhaps if you've been in the game, knowing that there's some wily veterans in the crowd potentially. Okay, so this is it starts with a phone call. Hey, I've got a job, right? And it's going to be Katy Perry Super Bowl, or it's going to be, let's go to Smashers World now, it's going to be Billie Eilish on an XR stage, right? My summary of all what I want out of an initial phone call or a client interaction are these three things. Who am I working for? What's the budget? And when's it due, right? And those three things usually get some sort of reaction that's like, oh crap, or some other word, right? Because there's something that's being done in that process that somebody's asking you to do the impossible or break the space-time continuum, so to speak. So those of us, I was watching a little bit of polls stuff. They're asking you to do something potentially that's never been done before. So you might as well get over it. Some of us process that together, right? Like on a back channel Slack and go like, can you believe so-and-so? This is ridiculous. Yes, of course it's ridiculous. What we do for a living is ridiculous. So we've got to get over that part. And then we go into then, well, how might we, right? And so for me, process is really, really the king. And this is the process I teach. It's a very simplified process. Hopefully it feels familiar to those of you who have done it before. But we've got the phone call over there on the left. We've got what I call the concept document. So we concept first and we say, hey, I heard you. This is what I think we should be making, right? And then you're going to get an approval on that. You're going to go into a design phase. In that design phase for me is always the budget, getting the ballpark, and then R&D, production, rough animations, motion, and then another approval, then on-site or wherever, or remote as we are now. And then that cycle just keeps pinging back. So one of the things I teach is really about getting and receiving feedback. So I make the students go through this process several times as they're even creating personally. They have to pitch to me, I give them feedback, and then they keep creating as they move through. So there's never like, go away, make something, show up, it's going to be awesome, I promise you. That doesn't happen for me. And it doesn't result in necessarily the best work. You need to be getting your own work even critiqued, right, as you go through, even if you're an insular sort of artist, is you want people to understand and see it. Okay, so this is my caution, which is, all right, great, I got your process, I think I understand it. I have some great ideas show up, and I say, wait, I've made mistakes, let me give you a few tips. So these are my tips before we get into the actual sort of creation process. One is you've got to do your homework, right? This is something that we don't think about, I think, if we've been doing this for a long time, but I've got back into when I started teaching it, is there is an ecosystem that if you're making things for music, let's say it's a festival, right, or it's a band, that you need to realize that you're part of a greater picture, right? The thing you might be creating is a moment way down there at the bottom, that's a song, a part of a set, that's a part of a concert. But there's a million other things happening. There's record releases potentially going on, there's video shoots, there's merch being sold, there's a whole bunch of other things that you don't necessarily know about. And so what you want to do when you're getting involved in music is to really do your homework. One of the other parts that you don't think about is like knowing, maybe, my wife was really good about this, when I was out there a little bit more, is monitoring people or social channels and going like, hey, who are people dating? So you don't like stand there and make some sort of disparaging remark about the music artist when the girlfriend or boyfriend is sitting right next to you. So you knowing kind of what is going on around this, one, protects you, but also makes you aware of what this band or musician is really about. Okay, so this is my first rule with the students when I teach them, is that bands are brands. And I know that's a little bit brutal, but I like this picture from U2, which is from Dreamforce, which is at Dreamfest, right? So it was a band performing within a branded experience. And if you don't understand their brand, you're going to be in big trouble, right? You can't not know their history. So U2 is an intimidating band that has a brand that's been around for a long time. One of the more terrifying jobs that you can be a part of is for a musician, like, let's say, a legacy like Fleetwood Mac, for instance, right? You may not know, my students may not know who Fleetwood Mac is, but they better figure it out and understand some of the history and know where those songs are coming from. And so what I do is I make them make another document that I wish I would have gotten from creative directors on jobs. It's this thing, which is a band brief. So every student who creates something in my class has to go and research what this band is all about. And so for you creative directors out there who have teams working underneath you, this would be a really amazing tool, right, to have for all the people that are working within your ecosystem. You can't assume that everybody from top to bottom is going to care as much as you are about your job as a creative director. So you have to be able to have even at least a communication device internally about what this artist is about, especially if you've got designers working on it. So this is a student of mine, Harold. I think he's out there somewhere. Hey, Harold. And what they do is they make an overview. This is, I'm going to probably say his name wrong, Mala, French DJ guy. And he did a really nice job going through the kind of the history for me, who I didn't know who this person was at all, and found fonts, logos, and found everything from fashion all the way top to bottom, so that I, as an unknown person, perhaps working on his team, could go, okay, I get this. He wears a ski mask. He's dangerous. You know, there's concerts, and then they find visuals that concept with it. Beyond that, what I asked them to do is they say, where are they now? Well, they were at Coachella, but they have to make recommendations to me if they were in charge of, let's say, a song or a visual, where they would take them as potential creative directors. So this is Harold's tear sheet in here, where he's like thinking about, you know, gold bars or diamonds or things like that. So let me jump back to here. So a band brief is really a helpful, even just internal tool to make sure you know what you're doing for a band. Another little hot tip here is tell me who I am and what does my song feel like. These are two phrases that I found over the years that always stuck with me. I think it was Paul Normandale, in a conversation I had with him, said, you know, we're really in the tell me who I am business. And what he's saying to me in that is, when an artist reads through a creative brief, what they're looking for is, do these people get me? Do they understand my history? And what are they trying to say with the visual, giant visual behind me about this song? Do they understand the song? I've had multiple gasps where I've totally missed the point of the song, right? One song for an artist I wrote was about teen angst, but it was totally not about that at all. And it was an awkward moment. And then the other one is, what does my song feel like? And I think that came through a conversation with Drew Finley years and years and years ago, where we kept missing at Lightborn, where I worked for a while, missing the concept. And he's like, you've got to, and he coached back, he says, you've got to understand that it's about color and it's about feeling and it's not about narrative. I came from a narrative background in terms of filmmaking, and so I tried to approach everything, and I'll get to that, as a narrative, when it really wasn't necessarily. It was about color and it was about feeling. Okay, TLDR, too long, didn't read. Here's a huge summary of probably one of the most effective things I ever learned, which is nobody reads anything anymore. And so with my students, they'll come in and they probably can write papers and they can write really good essays and things like that. The first thing I get back to is they have to be able to communicate visually and not necessarily with words. Another painful moment for me is, I think it was Bon Jovi doing visuals and doing a pitch, and I did I did a song which was one of their famous ones, Shot Through the Heart, and I wrote like a 10-page written treatment for this song early on. There's no way they care about that at all, right? No way. And it's really embarrassing. I sometimes go back and I look at it and say, wow, I was an idiot. But what they're looking for is maybe one iconic moment or one thing where they can look at it over 5 minutes and understand it. You won't have as much time as you think you do, right? And then this one is my imaginary letter from the artist at their luxury hotel, who says, dear video content, this show's not about you. Love, huge pop star. P.S. Everyone's watching this giant screen. If it sucks, it's all your fault. So you are very vulnerable because it's the giant screen behind this artist. Most people don't understand lighting, right? An LD friend of mine said to me, he said, he said he felt bad for us. And I was like, what do you mean you felt bad for us? It's like, because everybody watches television and goes to the movies. Everybody thinks they're an expert on what you do. There's not many experts on what I do, and I can pretty much do whatever I want. And no one really cares as long as I'm on beat. And so it's a visual communication language that everybody on the planet participates on, and it's the biggest thing behind you, yet it's really not about you. So it's a high wire act if we're honest, right? Okay, so those are my little hot tips. I'm going to start at a concert, and I'm going to drill down all the way to a song, and I'm going to do it hopefully here pretty quickly. A concert, right? It's what it says it is a collision of many participants and elements in a specific space and time working together as one in a recognizable way. I mean, Laura and Elliot, it's a freaking miracle. If you really think about all the things that could possibly go wrong, to even have a halfway decent show with all, thousands of people showing up, all these different components and electronics. And it is one of the great privileges of my life to get to work on jobs like this U2 job here it's like, I grew up listening to U2, falling asleep to it. And I found myself one day standing behind this riser going like, oh my God, I think I'm on Michael Jordan's team, and all these people on this stage have been doing it for a really long time. You'll get to see Smasher later. I highly recommend listening to what he has to say about live camera direction. He's over there to the left at his little station, and there's Kez and Willie's there, and Alan Branton. And all of these guys understand that they're a team, and they all have their components, and they also know kind of who's the boss. And that's one of the things I got back to my other slide is you have to know who you're working for in these environments. And it's not always like I work for Willie when I'm on these jobs, right? And that I don't have any question about how I move through an authority system. If your authority system is not defined, there's usually somebody else that you don't know about that's in charge. Somebody's always in charge. So you have to figure out who that is. It could be the band's manager. It could be their best friend from when they're in school. But who's in charge of this giant ecosystem is one of the harder things to discern, but you just have to start asking questions. And I do it personally through contracts. I say, I define who I'm working for if I'm on a job like this. I love this picture because it just sort of defines the moment, like of all these teams and these people and these expertise coming together. And it is, again, it's a privilege to get to work with people at this level. And then I'm not going to spend much time on this, but to understand live shows and live environments, it's a ritual. There's a framework that's happening that's unspoken. So just like if you were going to church or whatever, Seder, there's a sequence that happens for everybody. And everybody who shows up is in this rhythm and they want to be there, right? They've paid a lot of money, they've traveled, and they're in. And in some ways, the worst thing you can do is to do something that they don't expect. You might be bored as a creative person, but they're not, and they want to see what they want to see. So within the show structure, and even within a song, there's this play of expectation and surprise. A friend of mine who's a musician said one of the worst tours he ever did was one where he decided he was going to make the entire thing improv. He wasn't going to set a set list. He would take requests from the crowd. And he said to me, I thought it was going to be like freedom, but it was actually not allowing me to do what I do best. And he's like, I know when I play these 3 songs together that they'll go nuts. I know when they turn the lights off and they turn the lights on, people go nuts. right? And so there's a great tool that you have, which is people are already participating in this rhythm and this ritual. There's a set list and a concert, and that you can play with expectation and surprise them, but you don't want to surprise people all the time. There's a rare breed of people that probably want to go to listen to a jam band for 2.5 hours. Most human beings don't really want to do that unless they're really high on drugs, right? And then there's this idea of the power of the icon. And this took me a while to absorb, but I got to see, standing at front of house, right, how the entire stage actually represents the band. And great stage designers and LDs, which I am not by any standard, but they understand that they're creating a picture that comes from that place, right? They see that this all plays together. The stage represents the band. The song represents what that song is about, and it's all going within this. I really appreciate Nathan Taylor, who's an amazing lighting stage designer. This is, I think, is Shawn Mendes' stage, and he does a really good job of understanding how simplicity creates iconography, right? He's creating a moment, and that I'm participating if I'm working with him within that moment. Okay, great. So with that, what I have my students do then is I have them basically pitch back to me, what is the icon? So this is Harold again. I think it's, sorry, let's click this off. This is Harold again. And one of the examples of how he says, okay, Ibranovsky, the illest, is Trippy Skulls. And to an English major, you'd be like, that's great, what does that mean? All I have to do right now is look at this and be like, I agree with you, Harold, that Ibranovsky, the illest, Trippy Skulls is exactly what that song is about. Make me skulls, right? And so when I'm concepting, or when I'm leading teams through concepting, I really take it down to this very visceral thing. You get one image for this song, and then you're going to play with that across the course of the song and then within the set. All right, so we talked about the process there. I just had it there as a reminder slide. And then you have a set list, right? So these songs are happening within a set list. And if you Google set lists, I Googled one here. This is a random U2 show. That's another part of the research is Google set lists. They're probably going to be a lot like what you're going to see if you're going on a gig, or they might be totally different, but know what bands have played, especially legacy bands, and how they build their sets. So you can see here that there's basically 3 acts. Most sets are built in 3 acts. If you really start to break them down, because there's nice breakers that happen between these moments of like the 3-act play and then the encore. You can see here that the second act is all of Joshua Tree. That's from the Joshua Tree 30th anniversary tour. Okay, and then there's this thing that I think I've processed enough, that a show and a song have emotional pivot points. So where is the emotional pivot point of the entire show? The pivot point represents where the value statement happens. That may be where you do the most creative stuff. That may be where you shoot fireworks off. That may be where everything is leading to. Is there a pivot point in the show? That's kind of within the set list framework. You can kind of find the pivot point of each end of the set, but you can also find it within each point of the song. And for me, watching this show enough, I can tell you, for me, Exit is the pivot point of this entire show. The guitar meltdown of Exit is the pivot point for me in the entire show. Now, somebody else who's doing it might disagree with me. Maybe theirs was Where the Streets Have No Name. But in the context of that show, with like the meltdown of America politically, it was the emotional kind of release and explosion of that show. So knowing where the pivot point is. This goes along with that, is when I identify pivot points in songs and in sets, I can take and go, okay, I need to make sure that I reserve a third of my budget for this one song, because the video needs to carry the day. This needs to be the pivot point emotionally. Or I can have a conversation with the LD and go, hey, Paul or somebody, this is going to be a big deal. Are you carrying this with lighting, or is this going to be fireworks, or is it going to be flame cannons? I don't have to worry about it. Great. We'll do it with IMAG, and I can spend my money somewhere else. So taking that set list and busting it apart and immediately funneling it as a creative producer into a budget is something that I very commonly do. This is a little tool I've thought up over the years where I can explain to non-musicians how songs flow. So you can, that line is basically general energy. There's really nothing other than that for me. I don't know how to quantify it, but going, hey, this is going to be a crescendo here at the outro. You don't have to understand tempo to sort of get down with what I'm talking about here. So the red dot means this is the important spot. This is kind of a conglomeration of a couple different creative treatment things that I use. One of the things that I've learned also over the years is assigning a color to a song. And making sure that I've got that identified, because you can't use, every song can't be red, every song can't be green. No one really wants to see a green song, by the way. That's one thing that I've learned. If you're gonna use green in a song, you better really have a reason to make a green song, because that's the one that always gets cut. And then these are prompts. I'll leave that up for a second. This is the prompts that I ask myself when I'm going through and concepting, or I take my teams through. Where does it place? Is it small, medium, large? What color is this song? You get one image. What is it? General vibes. What's my personal connection is something I try to get students to think about if they're not necessarily totally tapped into the imagination part of it. And then I usually present 3. So I call it playbook, normal, or freak out. So I say, hey, there's a playbook one here, right? The rock and roll playbook. This is what normal people would do. It's going to be fire. And then there's also like the left field. So I try to present in 3s. I think I'm going to probably, because I'm watching our time here, and I wanted to make sure there wasn't any questions, but I'm going to cover this and then I'll pause. This is the song for non-musicians, right? So if I have an icon, so let's take Harold's thing, skull. All right, you got a skull. What's the skull going to do? And you break it into, most pop songs have verse, chorus, or sometimes chorus, verse, chorus, and it repeats. And then there's a bridge, then there's a chorus, then there's an out. Each one of those needs a version of your icon riffed on till the end, right? So you can create content pretty quickly if you can create variations on a theme across this standard thing. So generally, when I pitch concepts, I think of, what's the verse look? What's the chorus look? What's the verse? And that second verse, what's the second chorus? The bridge, and then there's a big moment out. Done. And then you can pitch that. I'll come back to a script if we got it. I wanted to touch on musicality. This is the dream is happening right now, which is you can place musicality, which means things happening on beat, right? Especially if you've got your moments. So what's your chorus skull, your verse skull? And then if you can add musicality, that it's pulsing to the drum, or you can pick up on the vocal, or you can pick up on a guitar. Here's our little handy dandy notch visualizer, right? You can add musicality way down the line, and that's where you want to put it. You don't want to embed it in your freaking render of your remake of Lord of the Rings that's at 8K, right? You want to keep that at the end and keep it the most flexible, right? That needs to be the most flexible thing. And like I said, we're living the dream. This is totally possible. My students actually just did it with their end projects. They took and put musicality all the way through using Touch Designer. It was all live, and it was all changeable on the spot and all reactive to the song. And then there's that again. Okay, I'll leave the hot tips up. That's the magic run through of how to, the primer of creating visuals for music. Open for questions if we have time.
Nice.
Thank you so much. That is fantastic, Ben.
Great.
So when we do post these videos of the sessions on the Framework website, and we'll make sure everyone hears about it when they go up, and people can step slowly through the presentation and your notes, which are so detailed and great. I'm sitting here watching this, thinking about the work I've done in the past, and we intuit so much of this, but we rarely document our own process, let alone share it with others. And that's what's so wonderful to see this like laid out as a plan, because we all build our own version of this. And it's really clear to see it this way.
Right. And I'm by all means not saying this is the playbook, right? But it is, I think that Laura, we've talked about it. I think we have to codify some of it, because there's a lot of folks that are designing curriculums and teaching things that we can get students. What stunned me the most is how fast students picked it up when I sort of gave them the pattern, because I was used to doing it with industry people or whatever, and they're like, oh wait, and if they followed the path, they could get to a pretty decent result at the end. But I'm always open to talking about how to teach this kind of stuff and best practices, so don't be afraid to reach out.
And Ben's in the Discord server. You can reach out to him. I hope we can do more of this on the Framework platform in the future, because I think this would be great to even go deeper with some of these topics, because I know you had to rush through a lot of these ideas. And I'm going to wrap us up so we can get into the next session. But I really want to continue this discussion. So thank you.
All right, great. Thank you.
Thanks,
All
man.
right.